There's a racing event on about half an hour from Jen next year in April. And there's a 5K, a 10K, a half, a marathon, and an ultra marathon.
What are you going to be training for?
I'm going to do the 10K.
I should come to this.
Yeah.
We can have a meeting.
I was going to invite you in a sort of more natural way. I don't know why I invited you in such a weird way. It was mostly just to brag about my connection with Ben. I don't know. Do this. Can you imagine? I'll be there. Jen will be there.
Yeah, send me the details. I want to do this. I would be so excited to do a half marathon in the UK. Like, that would be awesome.
What about meeting me?
Well, yeah.
Prick.
That too.
Right, anyway, let's do the episode.
Yeah, what we doing?
You guys always make me sound like I've said something really mean when I'm just expressing happiness.
You give us no consideration or thought. That's why, Chris. And what I'm just repeating what you've just said back to you is all I'm doing. Where's the lie?
Awful. You guys are awful.
Hello, welcome to the Bookcast Club, a podcast for people who like to chat books. Today it is me, Sarah, coming to you from the Netherlands, and I am joined by Chris, coming to you from the US. I can't remember the name of that country. And Jenny, coming to you from Norwich in the UK.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, and as we were just discussing, it's our 100th episode.
100.
Can you believe it?
Wow.
We were going to do something like grand and exciting for it, and then we didn't. Life's sort of getting on top of all of us at the moment, so they didn't quite eventuate.
We also tried to think of something and couldn't.
It was a little hard.
Yeah.
So we're just going to acknowledge it. Say, well done, us.
100. That's pretty good. I feel like the episode, like, we put out a lot more frequently. You know what I'm trying to say now than we did.
Well, I mean, at the beginning we were very sporadic.
It just feels like it's been really a fast period of time. Like, I feel like since I joined that,
Yeah.
like, well, no, not like that. I'm just saying, like, I've not been here for very long, and it's just like, wow, we've hit 100 already. Like, boom.
I think you joined around, I want to say in the 60s,
Did
I believe.
Wow, it just seems like it has just flown by.
And I think I was in the 30s somewhere, right, Jen?
Yeah, we really hadn't reached that higher figures. We've been doing it for about 4 years before you joined, and then we were still only, we might have even been in the 20s, Sarah, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to say 20s, so I thought that sounded a bit pessimistic. But Chris, I think you've even been already here for like 2 years, my friend.
Have I? I just feel, every time I think about, like, when I joined this podcast, it just feels like it was 6 months ago.
I think it's like 18 months, 2 years. It's certainly been 2 years since of us knowing you.
That's insane. It just does not feel that long.
I'm actually just having a quick look. So, Sarah, you joined episode 19. We welcomed our new co-hosts.
That's right.
That's
God,
mad.
I can't believe I've been around for 80 episodes.
81 episodes. That's really intense. That's pretty great.
And I think, Chris, you did your My Life in Books, which I think was your first episode with us. That was episode 46.
That was like a guest spot. It was doing the fantasy episode that kind of got me trapped.
That was like late 50s, early 60s in terms of
Yeah, I think so.
number.
I think so. Well, so yeah, all that to say, we've had a lot of episodes and a lot of good times, and we'll let the good times continue rolling.
Jesus Christ. All right. Thank you.
58, Chris. That's when you started.
Wow, good memory, Sarah. Really good memory.
Thank you.
So you've done nearly half of it with us.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like you've been around for that long, actually. For
Yeah.
I think once we started going fortnightly, obviously you'd start racking them up then. But yeah, I can't quite believe we've hit 100. Well done, us.
Here's to 100 more.
Oh God. Panicked. We'll see.
Yeah, we're exhausted.
We are. How is everyone? Has anyone got any news?
Doing pretty good. Doing very good. Reading's been doing a lot better. I've been reading a few, like, kind of short, experimental, kind of testing the boundaries of my taste lately.
Intriguing.
Everything you're saying to me sounds absolutely salacious. Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe it could just be me.
I read two little experimental books that were really good. I read an Otessa Moshfegh.
Oh.
And it was great. Death in Her Hands.
I haven't heard of that one.
Have you heard of this one, Sarah?
I think so. She wrote Eileen, right?
Yeah, Eileen and My Year of Rest and Relaxation, Homesick for Another World, and Maglue is her other book. Lapvona. Yeah, so she's been quite prolific over the past few years because I think, Eileen only came out in 2015, 2016. So this is a really meta novel. It's pretty short and it's a reflection on art and isolation told through this kind of deconstructed mystery plot. So it opens up on our 72-year-old protagonist taking a walk in the birchwood behind her house with her dog, where she discovers a note on the ground that says, "Her name was Magda. This is her dead body. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me." But there's no body, there's no blood, there's no evidence anywhere that there should have been anything violent except for this note suggesting that this murder has happened. And so Vesta decides that she needs to investigate this crime. But actually, Vesta's idea of investigation is just to vividly imagine a completely fictitious Magda who might have existed, the life she would have led, and what would have led to her being killed in the woods. And she starts to create all these different lists of subjects that could be potential suspects in this murder, all these men who might have wanted to kill Magda. And you also start to learn about Vesta's life, her kind of tumultuous relationship with her husband. And it's all starting to blur into what is real, what isn't, what in the real world is real, because some of it feels like it's just actually Vesta projecting this story onto real people. And suddenly real people, she starts to pretend that they are characters in this story that she's making about Magda. It's really meta. It's really experimental. It's really strange and thinky. And yet it's still wildly entertaining and funny. And you feel as you're reading it that there's some hint of violence off in the corner of your eye the whole time, that's never fully revealing itself and just seems to kind of haunt the book. I really liked it. I thought it was really, really good.
I feel like she's an author that I'd like. I just haven't got around to trying her yet.
In some ways, it's a little bit similar vein of something like Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer that we really liked, in the sense that it's got this propulsive, almost genre plot, to it, but that's just been totally deconstructed into a meditation on something else completely, and it's really fun when you're reading it.
Yeah, I've read Eileen, and I have to say I didn't like it very much. And then I started to read Eileen is really similar to Rebecca thematically by Natalia in a way that's almost quite
interesting.
Weird. There's a character in Eileen that is basically Rebecca. I think her name's even Rebecca. It was quite weird. So I didn't enjoy it. And then I started reading Lapvona and I really liked it, but I had to return it to the library. Story of my life. So I did really like that, but I didn't finish it. So yeah, I would be interested. I have to say, My Year of Rest and Relaxation does not appeal to me at all.
It didn't to me either until after I finished Death in Her Hands and really, really liked it. Obviously, I want to read more Moshfegh, but then I also started watching Moshfegh interviews and stuff like that online. And one of the things I saw was a reading from My Year of Rest and Relaxation. And the prose, and I guess the way it was written, just wasn't what I was expecting it to be at all. It was much more intriguing and sedated, I guess, than I thought it was going to be.
That really puts me off. I don't know why. I want people to be upright. My Year of Rest and Relaxation, by the way, if you're not familiar with the book, it's about a woman who spends a year in bed, basically. And I believe she uses quite a lot of sedatives throughout the year to keep herself asleep or to sort of be as sedated as possible. And there's something about that. I don't know. I'm shaking my head instinctively. I don't like it. Maybe it says something about me. I don't know. I'm willing for that to be a personal problem, but I don't like it. Oh, so this is your currently reading, Chris? Or this is what you've just... Why did you start talking about this?
That's what I just finished. I'm actually not currently reading anything. I also just finished a really tiny little novella that I would definitely recommend called The Dry Heart by Natalia Ginzberg, who is an Italian novelist I had never heard of until I saw this little book at the bookstore. It's 80 pages long. Highly recommend it. It opens up on a woman murdering her husband after he asks her to bring him a thermos with a drink. And she just very frankly tells the reader, I gave him the drink and then shot him between the eyes.
Nice.
And Yeah, and the rest of the 80 pages is her really frankly telling the story of how they came to know one another, how they fell into a marriage with one another, and how she is haunted because her husband is actually in love with this other woman that she knows about around town. They've actually just never been able to marry each other, but they've had this years-long love affair, and she's always on the outside of her husband's affections. And it's about the kind of anger and seething rage that is left behind when love dries out, and it's really, really good.
That sounds great.
Oh, that sounds quite good. I'm currently reading Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead, which, to be honest with you, guys, I'm not enjoying that much.
Shame. I didn't like the one book I read by him.
Nickel Boys?
No, Underground Railroad.
Oh, okay. I did quite like Underground Railroad, and I didn't like the Nickel Boys that much. And this one is kind of, I don't know, something. I always like the premise of his books very much. And I actually saw him live. Do you see Authors Live? I saw him interviewed in Amsterdam a few years ago, and as a person, I really liked him. And I hate it when there's an author that you are like, what a cool person, and then you read their books, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I thought I would really enjoy this, and it's just not quite grabbing me. It's set in Harlem in New York in the 60s, and it's about a family who shuffle furniture. I guess they sort of buy and sell furniture. Slightly illegally. Is that furniture shuffling? Did I just make that up? But I'm just not quite grabbing me. So it's taking me a long time to get through it, so I probably won't finish it, I don't think. And the other thing that I have just finished reading is quite a departure from our normal kind of stuff. And it's a non-fiction book about trail running. It's called The Trail Running Guidebook by Hanny Allston, who's actually a Tasmanian runner. Like, she's an incredible runner, incredible athlete. And she's Tasmanian, which is where I'm from. And this is like a super practical guidebook about how to be a trail runner, which I am, and I've really been enjoying it.
I didn't know that the running you did was trail running.
Yeah, man. I'm really like, whenever I pick up a new hobby, I'm like, now what can I do that's the most obnoxious version of this hobby? And that is for sure trail running. I'm a huge, lifelong hiker, huge fan of hiking. And then I have to exercise quite a lot as part of my mental health, blah, blah, blah. I dumb exercise my dumb brain, as I hear people say on social media, and manage to combine those two things because hiking doesn't quite do it, and trail running is amazing. Yeah, so I'm really training hard at the moment, trying to improve my trail running. And this book was really good. It's just a lot of stuff about, a lot of running. I know this has nothing to do with books. There's a lot of words that you hear in running all the time about tapering and interval training and hill training and your tempos and pace and all that kind of stuff. And she explains it very, very well and explains the principles, what you're doing when you do these insane programs that have you running completely different distances at completely different paces and why you actually want to do that. What about you, Jen?
I am currently reading a book called Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano is how I would say her name.
Yeah.
It has a very beautiful cover. I came across this because writing our newsletter, plug, it was one of the new releases, probably in July, and I like the sound of it. So it's a family saga about, I think, 4 sisters, and one of them starts a relationship with a guy called William, and then the blurb just sort of says that relationship tears the family apart. And I've only just started it, and it's a very nice, innocent relationship at the moment, so I don't know where it's going to go. But it's really funny because I obviously like the cover. Give the cover a Google. It's like a millennial pink cover with almost like a oil painting of a woman's face on the front. But once I'd picked this up and flagged it as coming out, I then saw it was on Obama's summer reading list.
Oh, okay.
And on the back, it also says it's the 100th Oprah Book Club pick. So I haven't seen it all over the place in the UK, but I've got a feeling it probably is in the US. But Miranda Cowley Heller, who wrote The Paper Palace, has blurbed it on the back, and actually one of her quotes is on the front of it as well. And I really like The Paper Palace, so yeah, I'm giving that a go. But I have ordered way too many books from the library. I got all excited about new releases and realised that my library is quite quick at getting them in. So I ended up reserving loads of new releases, and they've all come through at the same time. And obviously, because they're new releases, there's loads of people waiting for them. So I'm having to pick and choose which ones I finish, and I'm going to have to just hand a load of them back. But this one made the cut, so yeah, I'm enjoying it so far, but I'm only about 3 chapters into it. But yeah.
She wrote Dear Edward. I was trying to remember what other book she'd written that got a lot of press. It was Dear Edward.
Yeah, I'd never heard of her before. So that book obviously passed me by, but yeah, so far so good.
I forgot to mention something, and that is that I don't think we've talked about it yet. I read Vladimir. Have we talked about this? We might have talked about it privately, off air.
I think we might have done it over WhatsApp.
Well, that's off air. That's private.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, using end-to-end encrypted communication. What's up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I read Vladimir. I don't know if you remember, Chris. This is that book that Jenny was talking about that she liked.
By Julia May Jones.
Julia May Jones, yeah, about the professor who, she's a middle-aged woman and she's married to another professor, and then he gets accused of sexual misconduct or something with his students, and it is about her and her sort of like love affair with this other guy called Vladimir. And then Jenny was like, I loved it apart from the last 20 pages, which were horrendous, and it got me curious enough to read it. And the last 20 pages were really fucking weird. She's right. It was really fucking weird. And also there's so she and this guy start to kind of like, she becomes quite infatuated with this other member of the teaching staff, and her husband have an open marriage, so it's all hunky-dory, as we say in Australia. And so that means A-OK.
Crack on, that's what that means.
And so she becomes absolutely infatuated with this guy, and it's quite, the writing is gorgeous. It's the main character is very funny, and it's very like delicious, I would say, the writing. Yeah, about halfway through it takes a really weird turn, and I was like, oh, this is the turn, and Jenny's just off by 50% of the book. She's mad. But no, that was just a normal plot twist, and then the last 20 pages were really wild.
This has me so curious as to like what these 20 pages.
It's a huge spoiler. Like, we can't even really hint at it, otherwise it really gives it away.
One of my friends, actually, who listens to the podcast, she was like, I cannot believe you didn't say what the ending was. Like, it was really annoying.
I was like, I can't. It's so wild. Just can't even hint at it.
I'm definitely going to read it now.
It's only short, so, like, read it is what I'd say.
I mean, we can tell you, Chris. We can put the ad in here.
No.
Oh,
I don't want to know. I want to know. I want to read it myself.
I think the author is Julia May Jonas as opposed to Jones.
Oh, okay, Julia May Jonas. Got it.
Is it her debut?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like she doesn't know how to finish it. So she was just like, fuck it, I'm just going to go completely bananas at the end.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say it feels like a debut in that respect because there's so many plot lines. Like there's so many threads that could have been probably their own novel.
I'm really sad that it looks like the British cover of it does not have the sleazy man with his shirtless unbuttoned.
Oh yeah, that's awful.
Button up. No, I love it so much.
Oh, I enjoy that cover.
I love that cover so much. I'm sorry, I'm gonna be really honest that it's so hot. Yeah, I would.
The version I had that cover, Chris. So I don't know whether there might be a different one. The paperback, I think they scrapped it. I'm like, why? I enjoyed that cover.
I had the red hardback that looks very Handmaid's Tale-y.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other one.
I
know. I like the little. It's so funny because it just looks like you're reading something sleazy, like
the manscaped chest.
It's not that sleazy, actually. In fact, it's not at all. I would say. Has everyone got everything off their chest?
I think so.
Yeah, like I said, I'm between books now, so.
All right, well, keep us updated on that exciting development, Chris, won't you?
This is where we pop a little ad break in to tell you about all the different ways you can support the pod, most of which are totally free. A really effective and easy way of showing your support is by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. There is a link in the show notes that will take you straight to the Apple Podcast page where you can write a review. If you listen on Spotify, you can also very easily give us a star rating. You can also share our posts on social media. We are at Bookcast Club on Instagram and TikTok. You can sign up to our free monthly newsletter on Substack, where we share even more book recommendations, our pick of the new releases, and all the latest podcast news. But the best way for us to find new listeners is by you telling your book-loving friends and family about us. If you want to support the podcast financially, we do have a Patreon account. You can sign up for as little as £2 a month. We offer early access to the podcast, a close friends feed on Instagram, monthly bonus episodes, and our top tier will get you all of the above and personalised book recommendations. We get you to fill in a survey and then we tailor our book recommendations to your preferences. We also send you books in the post. There are over 30 bonus episodes you can get instant access to if you sign up as a patron today. We now also offer a 7-day free trial with our bonus tier. The link is in our show notes. But however you choose to show your support, we as always want to say a huge thank you. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners.
Shall we discuss Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi?
Let's do it. How did we come about reading this?
I think it's because I think Sarah had both enjoyed Transcendent Kingdom, right?
Yeah, I love Transcendent Kingdom.
I did too. I love Transcendent Kingdom. And yeah, I hadn't read Homegoing. Had you read Homegoing prior to this, Sarah?
No, and then I just went to the library a couple of weeks ago, and it was just like, you know how the library always has those little feature shelf thing?
Mm-hmm.
It was just on there, and I was like, oh yeah. And that's honestly how I end up finally getting out a lot of books like this that were big, like in the last 5 years. And you're like, oh yeah, must read that one day. And then often that's how I end up finally. I've been like, oh yeah, I'll just grab that. And then we were trying to think of a book club book, and I just said it because I knew that you. I thought you actually read it already, but I must have just confused the Transcendent Kingdom and Homegoing.
Yeah, I had started it a long time ago, but had not finished it. I had only read like 1 or 2 chapters. So yeah, I was definitely due to read this one, and I'm really glad that I have. I liked it. It wasn't as good for me as Transcendent Kingdom, but I'm really excited to talk about it because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with it. And also, full disclosure, I'm like not quite finished with the book. I've got like 50 pages left. So I know I'm going to be talking just a little bit out of my ass, but I have read enough to have definite opinions on a lot of different stuff.
You should have read the Sparks Notes website and just blagged it, which is what I did all the way through school. I think it was Alice that has read this on the podcast.
Okay.
Quite a while ago.
Awesome.
She talked about it on the pod, so I'm pretty sure it's Alice that enjoyed it.
So Homegoing was the debut novel by Yaa Gyasi, who so she wrote Transcendent Kingdom, which came out about 2 years ago, which a lot of people on this podcast absolutely adored. And Homegoing is about it starts off in 18th century Ghana, and it is about essentially 2 families in 18th century Ghana, and then it is set as a bunch of interconnected short stories. So it starts off with these 2 people in the 18th century, and then every short story subsequent to that is the next generation of their 2 family lines, and one half of the family tree ends up migrating to the US, or not migrating, sorry, slaves, ends up being sent to the US, and the other half I basically stay in Ghana. I think it gets it quite, there's a lot of short stories in here. So you're essentially following, there's a family tree at the beginning, and you're essentially following each branch of that family tree in sort of 2 directions. Yes, as I say, interconnected short stories. It doesn't go back to, so you're only going forward in time. It doesn't go back to any of the previous characters. So every person that you encounter, you basically only encounter them once, and then the only time that you see them again after that is as the next person is referring to their father or their grandfather, or whatever. So you really liked it, Chris, but not as good as Transcendent Kingdom, you say?
It's an interesting one. I think that at the end of every short story, there was a feeling I had that the story felt incomplete. And I think that was intentional. I think that it was supposed to kind of mirror the way that slavery had, in so many ways, truncated these people's lives, hopes, dreams, ambitions, all these different things, never able to fully achieve because of the different ways that slavery binds them, and then through the generations as it reverberates, right? So there were times when I felt that it was like very intentional, and then there were other times I felt like maybe it was just clumsy. So there were times when I felt like the stories, for example, there's one story, and I can't remember the actual name of the character, but he's a dock worker in Boston. And he's a free man. He was escaped slavery as a baby. And you get in the beginning the sense that there's something bad that happened aboard one of these ships in the dock, and there's some investigation going on, and the police are searching it. And you think that's really going to like go somewhere, and then it doesn't. And there's a few stories that have elements like that feel like they're real like Chekhov's guns that like never really go off.
Nice.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just feel kind of odd.
I thought that there were definitely some of the stories were stronger than others, and particularly I thought that the closer we got to the US and sort of modern day US, the stronger the stories got. I did get the sense that as we got closer to obviously the author's sort of own experience, the stories did get stronger. And yeah, it was interesting that some of the families, some of the way that the characters were connected, I thought was very detailed and very rich, and in other ways it was almost, I don't know. I was also kind of going back and forth on whether it was like intentionally arbitrary or whether they just weren't drawn as well. There were a couple of stories in here in particular that I thought were really, really excellent. That I really, really liked.
I think that's the thing, because it's essentially a short story collection. It suffers from what I feel every short story collection suffers from, in that you never spend that much time in one place and you never spend that much time with one character. Therefore, I never felt quite detached from the whole thing. It felt quite cold, and I think I've decided now that I felt like that about Transcendent Kingdom as well. So I'm just wondering if actually for me, Yaa Gyasi's writing is just a little bit cold for me.
I think that for me, Transcendent Kingdom was a much more intimate book. Homegoing, definitely, I felt there were definite stories I felt there was a real distance with. And the fact that you just don't spend a ton of time with each character, you don't really get a close sense of them as characters. Whereas for me, Transcendent Kingdom was quite an intimate novel, because you're really following just one family over the course of many years. I also felt that like the writing in Homegoing was much more commercial than Transcendent Kingdom. I feel like she was holding back maybe a little bit with Homegoing, or maybe, the plot of the book, the structure of the book, all that was ambitious enough that you just needed more straightforward prose. But for me, the writing wasn't as near of a standout as I was hoping it would be, from how much I loved her prose in Transcendent Kingdom.
Yeah, I think the thing is, it's a hugely ambitious novel, and it covers
insane
a huge amount of Black history and intergenerational trauma. And the only thing I think I found with the format of it being pretty much a short story collection is that short story collections that are interlinked I actually really enjoy, but you can have wildly different stories that have some element that links them together, whereas I think with this, she's gone with that format, and like you are both saying, it just doesn't quite work all the time. And then particularly the ending, I felt like she had to wrap it up somehow, because even though it is a short story collection, at the same time it isn't like it's a proper narrative structure to the whole thing. Like there's a narrative to it, which there often isn't in an actual short story collection. So I did feel like it suffered a bit from the format. And like you say, Chris, it does kind of feel like it's, although I've in the same breath said that I think her writing in both novels is quite cold and detached, they do almost feel like they're written by different people. I don't know that I particularly recognise that it's the same author. And it's not like she's had 10 books in between and you've seen the progression of an author. Like it feels like quite a jump, Transcendent Kingdom, I thought, from this one.
Interestingly, what you're saying about the short story collection, I actually found that I think I prefer this format for this kind of story, the short story, even though it doesn't work in places. I actually found it more effective and engaging, because I have read quite a lot, to be honest, of this kind of novel set, especially sort of the like 18th century sort of era, 18th century and modern day stuff in between, not so much, but of this about this kind of thing. And I found this the jumping forward and looking at more people, I found I honestly found I preferred it. I often find that these kind of novels can be super draining, and they're not something that I am ever particularly motivated to read, because they're just honestly really fucking depressing. And there's nothing you can really do to get around them. And there was something about the way this was broken up and the way that it moved, that even though it is still, of course, fucking depressing, I don't know, I preferred it. It's interesting, the comparison to Transcendent Kingdom, because normally I wouldn't compare two novels like by two different, like by one author we wouldn't go on about the other novel so much, but they're so different in theme. So in Transcendent Kingdom, for anyone who hasn't read it, it's about one woman who is a research scientist, I believe, in somewhere in the US, Yes, and her brother is a drug addict who has died, and then it is talking about her mother comes to visit her and stay with her, and it is about her the grief of this family. It is about her sort of like dealing with her mother in this context of her like super academic environments. Her mother is Ghanaian. It's about how a lot of the things that happen in her family are not at all understood by her colleagues. But it's a very in-depth, microscopic look at like her and a really detailed look at her life. So structurally, it's completely different. Like you couldn't really be more different. But I think the way that they are written actually is kind of similar in terms of the emotions, because a lot of the stuff in Transcendent Kingdom is kind of implied, like it doesn't really spell it out for you, and it is kind of the same in my opinion in Homegoing. So you're sort of reading about these people, but it's not in a super detailed, super emotional, super laid out way. And I thought Transcendent Kingdom was quite similar.
She has a very careful writing style. Like when I read her books, I really feel like each word is so carefully put in there for a very specific reason. It has a real sense of surety, you know? I just think that the prose was beautiful in Transcendent Kingdom in a way that it wasn't here in Homegoing. I think maybe that for me was the biggest disappointment. But the one thing I wanted to comment on that I really liked was that each of the stories really kind of tested the complicity of a lot of these characters and like what was going on around them in ways I wasn't quite expecting. And especially the story that I had mentioned to you when we were on break a little bit ago, where there's a story of this woman who she gets accused of being a witch. And prior to her being accused of being a witch, she had kind of stood by and just kind of watched her village burn this man alive. And, you know, this mild spoiler, I guess, but I mean, it doesn't like spoil the whole book or anything. The same fate ends up awaiting her, right? And the way it's written is really powerful. Like I was quite gut punched by that story.
It certainly isn't a book that, yeah, I mean, she definitely questions the role that some black people played in like the slave trade. It certainly isn't just pointing fingers isn't the right thing, because obviously it was horrendous, but she explores both sides of it, not just the role that white British people played in slavery, but yeah, the complicity of like some of the black chief tribes. Yeah, it's a hugely ambitious novel. Like I couldn't really get over the ambition of it, and actually she does achieve what she sets out to do, I think. I can't deny that it's a very good book, and I can see why. I mean, I think its average rating on Storygraph's like 4.5 or something. I get it, and I can see why it's being taught in schools. I think it's being taught in schools in the US. I can't see that it's on the reading list of like taught texts in the UK, but I can see why it would be taught in schools, because it gives a huge breadth of that, if you know the black history and slavery. And
well, it's actually quite an informative book. Like there's definite times when you're reading it where it definitely feels like she's trying to explain to the reader some historical event or something like that, you know, like the Fugitive Slave Act and stuff, where she's like, hey, I'm going to spell out exactly what happened in history. So it kind of makes sense actually that it's being taught in schools alongside like a history lesson.
Yeah, I think the only thing I found was that I think we're going to go on and talk about which ones we found that were our favourite short stories, but I find talking about it like that really strange, and that's what I found quite strange about it, is that some of the stories I was like, meh, which I always get a bit like with short story collections, and I really hated having that feeling that I was being dismissive of some of these stories, because obviously in a historical context it's all horrendous, and it being laid out in front of you in this way, in the format it's in, and in not any particular depth. Yeah, I didn't like being dismissive of some of it, or some of it not quite. I don't know, some elements of it not being as good as others. Does that make any sense? Like I I always get it with short story collections that I can be a bit meh about it, a bit, I was a bit numb to it all in the end, to be honest. And that's, a strange feeling to have with such a book.
No, I definitely understand that feeling, though. I feel like if it was just longer, like if each story had just maybe like 15 more pages, it would have been maybe stronger, but yeah.
I disagree, actually. I think they were a good length. Yeah, I think maybe it would have been good if the structure came around a bit more. That might have done something, but it's very... The problem is, like, a lot of them, they don't know what happened to them in the end. So you, the reader, don't know, but then the next people also don't know. So they'll make references to their grandmother or whatever. And if they were trying to escape, or if they were taken away by someone, you don't know.
Yeah, and she does, in the final story, it all does come back together again in a way that I was a bit like, okay.
You do get some closure, like it does circle back.
So in that short story at the end, I think it's the son is saying that he doesn't know some of his family history, and they return to Ghana and delve into some of that, and like it's all there, and it is amazing the breadth that she's tried to cover and the knowledge that she has, and obviously the research she's done, and like you say, Sarah, those gaps in knowledge and gaps in someone's family history that happens. But yeah, just something about the whole thing I found quite cold and not an enjoyable experience, which is a really strange thing to say because it's not a book that you would enjoy, but I did enjoy Transcendent Kingdom. That's a depressing book. That's not a happy book, really.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed that one, and I think it is probably because of her prose in that, and because you spend time with her characters. Whereas with this, I felt very detached the whole time, and I don't think I found it an enjoyable reading experience.
I actually found it really enjoyable.
I did too. Yeah, I found it quite entertaining. Yeah, I mean, she held my attention, and there were different. Yeah, and like I said, there's stories I felt were stronger than others, but I was pretty gripped the whole time.
I found them quite. Each one I would be really pulled into quite quickly, and sometimes with short stories, I find, especially if they're a little bit longer, and in my opinion, these are a little bit longer in the context of being short stories, I find a bit of reluctance when I finish one because I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to the next one and learn again. But this one, like, she'd get me. But I see what you mean, Jen. If you didn't like that kind of narrative, if you didn't like the narration, you wouldn't enjoy it as much.
It definitely pulls you through, doesn't it? More than a short story collection would. Like,
yeah, it's
moving forward. The story's moving forward.
I was gonna say, do you have any like stories that stood out as being your favorites?
The one, Nessa Stockham, who was the sort of slave that you hear the most about.
Is she the one who tried to escape with her husband and baby, and the baby was able to get away? Yes, that story was horrific. That was one of the most upsetting.
Yeah, it was really
Is
bad.
this the one where the husband was lynched?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And this is a really good example of what Jen was saying about how everyone's kind of a bad guy because everyone treats her horribly, including the other slaves. And it's really heart-wrenching.
Yeah, that one got to me. Like I said, the one where the witch, the woman was accused of being a witch, that one really upset me. I actually quite enjoyed the perspective of James, who was the guy who kind of got pulled back into the tribal politics of Africa after returning from studies in England. I really liked how his perspective on what was going on.
This is probably a point to make, actually. I part read this in physical format and I listened to the audio. My lord, it is hard to follow an audio. Do not recommend, because I didn't know whose family line we were in. I get the impression from reading reviews that it's quite confusing anyway, but I didn't know which sister we were with. Like, I didn't know which side of the family we were with for a lot of the time, and I feel like near the start a lot of the same names are used, because there's definitely more than one James in the book, so
yes, there is.
It is quite confusing. Is the one you're talking about Chris, the one where he gets drawn back into actually the slave trade?
Yeah, it was the wrong one. It wasn't James at all. It was his father, Quay.
Okay.
That's the one whose story I really liked. Where he had returned, and then he ended up, his uncle ended up having that marriage arranged for him.
And he has the other wife. Yeah, I definitely looked at the family tree at the beginning of every story to orient myself. And I found that super useful.
As I was saying, obviously in audio you don't have...
Yeah.
It's probably somewhere, but you don't have access to it. And I'd say that you definitely need it because it's not easy to follow.
There's a lot of generations. I mean, how many generations is that?
8.
6?
9. 8, yeah.
Across 2 families, you know what I say? So it's
lot.
like 16 altogether. It's a lot of people.
Yeah, and I'm dreadful with names at the best of times, so the audiobook would not have served me.
One of the stories that I liked was H's. So he's just called H.
Yes.
And he works in the mines. So although they've been, correct me if I'm wrong, although they've been freed as slaves, then ultimately they kind of still end up being slaves if they've been convicted of something, because then they're just they're slaves in the mine instead, just because they, rather than prison you can be a slave. And for some reason I really like that story, and I wonder if it's, I could be making this up, it might be because the story is actually a little bit longer, and I think we spend a bit more time with him and just learn a bit more about him as a person. So for me, that one seems to be the one that really stuck with me, because he starts campaigning, doesn't he, for not even better workers' rights but better pay, because he essentially says, well, we know we're screwed over anyway, we're all going to die of some sort of lung condition, there's no way out of this for us, we just want better pay so that we can leave money for our families and leave our families in a better position. And that one really stuck with me.
Yeah, I liked his story a lot, and also I liked it because I felt so bad for what happened to him and his mother. It was awful. Yeah, I really liked H's story. I loved all the stuff with the Union. That was all very good.
Yeah, he and Sunny, I think, the sort of most comprehensively drawn, because Sunny is the other one whose story you kind of see in a couple of different ways, and you hear a lot more. There's a bit more time covered when he's in it. I really liked the one, Akua's story. She's the one who ends up, am I thinking of the right person? The two who end up being together when they shouldn't be, and they sneak off. I really like that story.
Yes, I know the exact story you're talking about. I loved that story as well.
Yeah, that was quite different from the others. I really liked it. It's about halfway through.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and then they have the daughter that wants to go to that city, but they can't.
Yeah, they get banned from the place that they run away from, and then she wants to go back to where they're from, and they're like, "Oh, we can't go there," because I think his dad actually he fakes his own death so they can be together.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that was a very good one. Yeah, I mean, overall, it's a really good book. It's a really strong debut. I definitely think that it, you can see, I think, traces of the brilliance from Homegoing, but it's just not as strong for me as Homegoing. Transcendent Kingdom. Yeah, can I talk? You can definitely see the traces of that brilliance, but Transcendent Kingdom definitely the better book for me.
Yeah, I mean, I adored Transcendent Kingdom.
It's just so good.
Really adored it. I mean, I think Homegoing is like a 4.5 for me. I really, really enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
It's a 4 for me. Easy 4 stars for me.
I have a very specific way that I rate books now, and I haven't done my rating system yet, but I have a feeling we're going to be on about a 3.75.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Jen's got a full algorithm.
Oh, unbearable.
Splitting hairs. Okay, so there's barely a star between us. But we're all sitting here like, well, I disagree.
Yeah.
I do think I've decided that maybe she's not the author for me, and I don't know if I'll read any more of her novels, although I can appreciate she's a good writer and her books are brilliant, and I can see why people enjoy her writing. Like I said, I do find her just quite cold, I think.
Yeah, I did look while we were recording, and there's no news of her next novel. Transcendent Kingdom actually came out in 2020, so hopefully she does something else soon. TikTok, yeah. Well, hang on, what TikTok? I just made a mistake. Can't say that word. TikTok, difficult. Let's wrap it up, lads. Lovely.
Yeah, we enjoyed it. Well, thank you guys very much for listening to 100 episodes. You can sign up for Patreon where we have over 30 bonus episodes now. I think maybe you guys can still get a free trial if you want to listen to some more episodes. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode.
101.
101.
Whoop, whoop.
Exciting.
Woo.
Bye.
All right, bye.